apple pie with 2 crusts, 1 crust on the bottom and then a lattice work crust on the top. I started making pies about 30 years ago when I found out that my husband loves pies. And I didn't know how to make pies. I knew how to make cream puffs and cheesecakes, but not pies. And it took me quite a few years to figure out how to make a decent pie crust. And I'd like to share it with you. So the first thing I do is get all of my ingredients and all of my materials together. So I have my pie plate. I like to use a deep dish because my husband likes lots of fruit in his pies. I have 8 apples here. Think I can hold them all? Anyway, they're washed. I have 8 apples here. I like to mix up my apples. I like to have at least 3 different types because that gives it a lot of complexity, flavor, and texture. I usually use McIntosh because they break down. Maybe a Granny Smith, Northern Spy, Cortland's, that combination. I went to Mom's and they didn't have any of those. So other than the Granny Smith, which are typical, don't use Red Delicious or Yellow Delicious. But I have some Crispins here. Tried to get a Stamen, couldn't find it, but I think it's gonna be a really nice pie anyway. We're gonna do this video in 2 parts. The first part will be the pie dough because I need to put that in the refrigerator after I make it. It has to sit for at least 30 minutes so the glutens can develop. And then I'll make the inside of the pie. Okay, so we're gonna start with our dry ingredients. That's 2 1/4 cups of flour, 2 tablespoons of sugar, and 1 teaspoon of salt, and mix it all together. Just like that. Make sure it's really well mixed. And now I'm gonna get my butter. I like to cut it down the middle, and then I turn it and cut it down the middle again, and then I make little cuts. Okay, then I'm gonna put that in the bowl. And now with your pastry cutter, you're going to cut the ingredients. Right now I'm cutting into it really steeply, like right into the butter. I will eventually, as it gets into smaller pieces, start lifting from the side and cutting. So I'm not just mashing the butter, I am trying to coat the little pieces with the flour. Okay, so I've been cutting a little bit and I'm about to go get my Crisco. It's my shortening, and that I keep in my refrigerator all the time so that it's always cold and ready for making pies. But you can see it's just a really nice texture. So now I'm putting in my Crisco. I need 7 tablespoons of Crisco. And I'm not super particular about measuring it. I've been doing it so long that I just know how much to put in there. It is 7 tablespoons. Okay, now I'm going to incorporate the Crisco into the rest of the mix. And what I find is Baltimore tends to be a little humid, and humidity really affects pie crusts. So even though a lot of the recipes that I've seen, some of them use your hands to put things together. I never use my fingers for a pie crust because it just melts stuff. I don't want that. I want all the ingredients to be as cold as they possibly can be. Now I'm gonna get my water. Okay, so I have my water. It has been chilling in my freezer, and I drizzle the water over the top. I start out with 3 tablespoons because you really want to use the least amount of moisture in there as possible. Flakier crust. And I'm kind of like lifting up from beneath, almost folding it until it starts to come together. I use a wooden spoon. Just seems to work better. It doesn't stick. So I just put in a little over 4 tablespoons of water, and I've mixed it up with my wooden spoon, and it has a nice uniform color, and there are some nice clumps. So I'm going to form 2 balls. And unfortunately I don't have saran wrap today. I'm going to use aluminum foil. I usually have saran wrap or plastic wrap. But anyway, I make 2 balls, and then I'm going to flatten them into discs before they go into the refrigerator. I try to like mush them and flatten them at the same time so they're not crumbling on the side. My 2 balls of crust are in the refrigerator. They are chilling for 30 minutes. And while they're doing that, I'm going to make the filling for the pie. First, you're going to peel your apples. Hopefully you guys know how to do that. I also often share my peels with my dogs. They love apple peels. They're banned from the kitchen right now. So I have my peeled apples and I cut them in quarters, and I'm not super picky, but sort of picky about my slices. Pour out there. This is one way you can do it. I'll show you another way in just a second. I'm throwing those into my sink, not onto my floor. I didn't know until very recently, but don't give apple cores to dogs. The apple seeds are poisonous for them. The rest of the apple is fine. You could do it either way. I just don't want to have any that are too big that won't be able to be cooked. So another thing you could use is something like this. This will core it and then give you big slices that you can make smaller. The only problem is that a lot of apples don't have a core that's like directly down the middle. Sometimes you have to be very careful, make sure you don't have some of the core still stuck on the apple slices that you're making. Now I have my apples all cut. They're not quite mixed yet, but there are 8 apples in here sliced. I have 3/4 of a cup of sugar and 1/4 cup of flour. And I'm going to mix into that a little over 1/8 of a teaspoon of my cardamom. And I'm also going to put in about a teaspoon of cinnamon. Some people might put in lemon juice. They think it's going to keep the apples pretty. Some people do it for the flavor. I don't think the apples are going to need that because they're going to be inside a pie with cinnamon on them. They're going to turn brown anyway. And I feel like it puts a little too much moisture in the pie. And the cardamom really gives it that little zing. I just use spices. I'm gonna mix them up and I'm just gonna pour them over the top. All those yummy dry ingredients. I'm just gonna mix everything really well. Try to bring stuff up from the bottom, get the cinnamon all over it, cardamom. And I like to keep mixing it until everything is well distributed, and then I mix it a little bit longer so it gets super well distributed. My kids love to snack on these pieces, and oh my gosh. I know when it's mixed really well, when it starts to glisten. All right, so I have my first pie crust. And I put some flour down, and then I make sure I have it well covered. All right, so I just kind of press on it and roll it just a little bit. Press and roll. And I don't know if you can see this, but there are nice little chunks of butter. When it's cooking, they will make it nice and flaky. And I like to interrupt my rolling every now and again and put a little more flour underneath so that it doesn't stick to my surface. And don't worry about little breaches, it's okay. And get those guys back together. I like to roll it out until I can almost see through it. So I roll it up on the pin. And then I'm going to unroll it into my pie plate. And then just let it relax back into the base. And I do have a couple of cracks. It's not a problem. I'm going to do a little plastic surgery, and they'll be just fine. So I have the bottom crust is finished. I'm going to roll out the top crust and cut it before I put the apples into my crust because I don't want them to get everything all soggy. I'm cutting the top part into strips, and I have this great little device. I think it originally was made to make ravioli. I don't think I've ever used it for that. Try to make uniform slices. Now I'm going to put the filling into the bottom crust. Arrange those a little bit so they can nestle down in there. So before I put the lattice work on the top, I'm just going to put a little bit of butter on the top, about a tablespoon. And now we'll start making the top. And I like mine woven. And now I'll just work back and forth. So then I'm just gonna seal the top gonna go around with my fork, and every once in a while dip that in flour so it doesn't get too sticky, and just seal the top to the bottom. And then I'll just cut it. Okay, so the last thing before I put it in the oven, and the oven has been preheating for the last, I don't know, 15 minutes at 425. I like to start with a very hot oven. I'm gonna put an egg wash on the top before I put it in there. It just gives it a beautiful brown color. I used to not put egg wash, and then one time I tried it and it made such a difference in the color and the presentation. I'm sold.
Cool.
There you have it. So I'm about to put the pie in the oven, and what I did was I put a cookie sheet in the oven that's covered with tin foil. That's on the very bottom rung of my oven because I want this pie to cook until it's bubbling. It's got to be really bubbling actively, and of course it bubbles over and makes a huge mess if I don't have something to catch it. So live and learn. I always have something to catch my drippings. So it's in the oven. It's going to be at 425 for 20 minutes, and after that I will turn it down to 365 degrees. Found that 365 is just the perfect amount of heat, and I do that for then about 30 to 40 minutes. I keep close tabs on it. So it's been in the oven for 40 minutes now. 425 for 20 minutes, and then 365 for 20 minutes, and I'm just going to check on it. Smells wonderful, but it's not quite cooked yet. I don't see any bubbling. We're gonna let it cook a little bit longer. So just gonna check on it one more time. Got some nice bubbling going there. Look at that. It's gonna be a good pie. I'm just gonna turn the oven off. There you have it. An apple pie. Have a slice.